Por eso te invito a que agendes una asesoría virtual conmigo para poder platicar más a detalle en relación al programa, destino, fecha de viaje y presupuesto. Será un placer apoyarte en este proyecto y concretar tu sueño. Vanessa Guillermo, Class Education.
El encuentro creativo llega a ustedes como una iniciativa de la Embajada de Italia, de parte del excelentísimo señor Luigi de Chiara, y por supuesto a través de la Cámara de Comercio Italiana, cuyo presidente, Lorenzo Vianello, y su directora, Fariba Gallardo, hacen posible este encuentro junto con el trabajo de todo el equipo que está detrás. Tenemos unas palabras para comenzar.
Soy Luigi de Chiara, embajador de Italia en México. Soy muy feliz de presentar Encuentro Creativo con la presentación de la oferta formativa de estas instituciones académicas en el campo de las industrias creativas italianas. Queremos ofrecer a todos los mexicanos no solo la posibilidad de mejorarse de un punto de vista técnico, sino también de saber dónde van las tendencias, cómo se ha construido el éxito del Made in Italy.
En la Cámara de Comercio Italiana en México estamos honrados de poder promover la oferta académica italiana entre los estudiantes mexicanos. Durante la primera edición, en las 2 semanas del evento, tuvimos más de 2.000 alumnos participantes y logramos un alcance en redes sociales de más de 1 millón de personas. Este proyecto nos brinda la oportunidad de acercar México e Italia, 2 naciones amigas y que tienen muchísimo que ofrecer en materia de creatividad y diseño. Disfruten de todas las actividades que hemos planeado en coordinación con las mejores universidades de diseño que hay en Italia y junto con las marcas que nos apoyan en esta iniciativa.
Bienvenidos a esta segunda edición de Encuentro Creativo, que te permitirá conocer más acerca de la oferta académica que la capital de la moda y el diseño ofrece, Italia. Por favor, síguenos a lo largo de las conferencias de Encuentro Creativo. Muchísimas gracias y bienvenido.
Pues muy buenos días. En esta ocasión vamos a tener una plática que se intitula The Creative Process for Image Makers in the Age of Social Media, el proceso creativo para los hacedores de imágenes en la era de la social media, de la media social. Y esto lo va a estar impartiendo Willy Ndatira, mejor conocido como William Colt, que es director de arte y editor. Ha colaborado con editoriales y marcas como, Gucci, Jordan Luca, Florence, Fantastic Man, The Perfect Magazine, ID and Another Man. Ahí nomás son de las revistas más importantes del mundo contemporáneo. En Polimoda, Willy Ndatira es un director artístico y editor que trabaja con editoriales y marcas. Se formó como diseñador de moda y obtuvo un máster en creación de imágenes en Central St. Martins con base en Johannesburgo y Londres. Ndatira es quizás más conocido por su cuenta de Instagram William Colt, que hay que seguirlo, @WilliamColt, donde comparte su investigación visual y discute de temas sociales. Y hoy nos va a hablar de que cómo las imágenes que están por todos lados, los creativos y los artistas, necesitan un enfoque diferente para hacer su trabajo. Nos va a hablar de su proceso, desde la investigación hasta el desarrollo del concepto, pasando por a quién elige como sus colaboradores, las campañas de Gucci, sus proyectos artísticos personales, la importancia de la autorreflexión y la autoevaluación en la era de las redes sociales. William Colt, be welcome. Thank you very much. You have the mic.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for webinar and hi, Mexico. I'm coming in from London, where I am partly based. And as you mentioned, I work with various publications like Fantastic Man, another magazine, ID magazine Dazed. A lot of them are based here in London. I work as a consulting editor, so on features, but also on image making as well. I did a master's in image making at Central St. Martins, which is, I would say, more of an art school than a fashion school as such. So the process that I learned there, I find it quite useful when it comes to establishing one's identity, establishing one's visual language. And that's what I do generally with the students in first year, second year, and MA with Polimoda. I work with them on 2 major projects every year, which is their midterm project and the final year project. So the final year project would be the biggest project that they have to produce. So they get given a theme, or we leave it open to the students, but then we give them the assets that they have to create. So leaving it open is for the students to choose their own theme that they're going to be exploring. Obviously, the themes would have to be kind of interesting for the general public, because otherwise it becomes almost too personal. So the personal becomes universal. So if you working with, let's say, beauty, you can explore the history of beauty, the pressure on women to look a certain way. You can look at colonialism. You can look at the kind of inclusivity that we have at the moment. So it's a process of seeing where the person fits and what they want to be doing in the creative industry, which is quite important. So I'm going to share my screen. Is that me? I'm trying to open my screen. Can everybody see my screen? No? Okay.
No, we can't.
You can't? Okay. Sorry, we didn't rehearse this before, so apologies for a little bit of the delay, because I usually work with Blackboard, Zoom. Let me try a different way. Yeah, we should have rehearsed this. Whiteboard, Safari, unknown. Sorry about that. I'm trying to figure out.
In the window of Zoom, in the
It's just
bottom.
for you to see my desktop, because I have all my talking points on my desktop, so it just makes it easier for everybody to see what I'm showing.
Yes, it's only there in the bottom of the Zoom. It says share screen, and then you can
Yes.
have all your desktop.
I have clicked on that, which says, is it the share screen at the bottom? And then I have the different desktop. And then it says open system preference. So I'm on a Mac and I'm just trying to figure out, apologies to anybody for this delay. I'm trying to figure out okay. Ooh, hold on. Unfortunately, in order for it to work, I have to leave the meeting and come back in.
All right.
I'll be back in a minute. Thank you.
That's fine. Precisamente lo que él estaba diciendo es todo esto que está aquí, que tiene que ver radicalmente con su trabajo fotográfico. Entonces, si alguno de ustedes lo quiere seguir a través de William Colt, entonces ahí está Willy Ndatira, y lo que nosotros vemos en su Instagram tiene 100,000 seguidores, o sea que es bastante grande. Y de hecho, algo interesante es que si bien, por supuesto, tiene vasos comunicantes con todo lo que sería la fotografía de moda y el editorial, en muchos casos también tiene como una profunda capacidad de registrar a nivel documental toda una serie de temas que entonces lo abre a la imaginación, la representación, y creo que como evento fotográfico O sea, tiene toda una densidad en la calidad de la imagen y en la posibilidad de referencias y profundidad. Hello.
Hi, I'm back. Yes,
You are back.
I'm back. So now I am going to share my desktop.
There you are.
You see it. Okay, great. So the introduction would first be obviously about a little bit about my work, which I'm going to do with this. What you were showing basically, which was how I got started. I joined Instagram in 2011. I basically started a platform which does curation and visual research. So I was very passionate about photography, any past artists that I found were interesting. And I built these files on my desktop. And from those files on my desktop, when Instagram came along, I decided to share, the different images, which in that case had an influence on design houses, magazines, for people that were looking for inspiration. So, I'm sorry, it wasn't anything new. It was just the fact that I used Instagram in a way that people weren't using it before. People were using it mostly for their own photography or for posting lunch and their picture of their lunch selfies. And I didn't want to do something that wasn't giving back to people. So for me, the attention I was getting, I wanted to kind of make it useful. Which was then the idea of sharing my visual research, which I did automatically in my job because I was working as a designer. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll back down. These are some of the Gucci projects. It's scrolling very slowly. So my training was as a designer. So I started as in women's wear. And when you work with fashion, you obviously do not just work from your imagination, you also do visual research. So anybody who's listening in and doesn't know the process of design development or even for photo shoots, a lot of things are referenced. A lot of things are built from one image to get to another. So that's where the visual research comes in, where you can go to bookstores, you can go to museums, you can go online, things like Tumblr, Pinterest, platforms like that, or even Instagram these days, to find inspiration. So you would call it inspiration. So your reference book would be files on your computer, depending on what kind of interest you had. So as a designer, I was already working with references and visual research. With the visual research, you obviously have the whole job of being a visual researcher with big brands. Some designers do not sketch anymore. They just work from a team of visual researchers who would gather, for a collection for J.W. Anderson, a British designer. Some say that, his collections can be built from 1,000 images that his research team would go and kind of find, and from him he kind of builds the collection from the photography that he finds. So that was the process I was already engaged with the women's wear I was doing. Then I switched to streetwear, and I wanted to reach a wider audience. So for me, Instagram was a way to connect with people, which again, here, the point is, in the digital age, as a creative, the tools are there for you to imagine them in the way that they work for you. Because one of the pitfalls I personally find is that people join these platforms and they tend to repeat what already exists there. So in order to get engagement or likes, they bypass maybe some level of creativity that they could have, or the kind of work that could be quite interesting that they could put on there, or an interesting way of working with the tool of, TikTok. You can do interesting videos, abstract videos? Why is everybody doing dances and lip syncing? So the general way that a platform is used is not always the only way, and it's not always the best way. So with Instagram, that's what I wanted to show. I wanted to kind of go into an idea of creating an open and public reference library, which now has evolved more in a platform which highlights young photographic talents. But in the past, it was more visual research, which could be paintings, which I would be using on prints, like in this example, taking prints and statues, working with printmakers, and kind of create prints from these images I would encounter online. So that's how I was using it as a fashion designer and as a brand. And then it just went into me sharing all those images, which I had thousands of them on my Instagram, to then create a different kind of Instagram. That's how the industry sort of got a hold of it and liked it, and that's how maybe the whole idea of William Cult was created. From that, I kept it anonymous because I basically didn't want to make it about me, but more about the work that's there. So again, you don't need to be the product on your own Instagram feed. You can use a digital platform as a way to connect with people, which is what I often tell people. It's a way for people to find your work. It's not for you to get maximum engagement, because everybody goes in there trying to beat the algorithm and to be as visible as possible, when in actual fact, it's better to concentrate on building a solid kind of body of work, which then when people discover it has, an effect and can build a kind of a fan base or a following that follows you for the right reasons. So, sorry, besides these are prints that I made for an exhibition in London. This is to do again with using things that you encounter online, digital work, through layering. This one was poisonous flowers and serial killers, to create a kind of a dangerous garden, which then was transformed into light boxes. I think you can see some behind me. And this was used as an installation for a brand, for my own brand at that stage, which I was still pursuing after St. Martin's, as a way again to question how fashion is presented. It can be presented in a more conceptual way. And this one was a fake art gallery. So we created a fake installation, not fake, because I mean, it was a real installation. It's just that I had never been in the art world. So I wasn't an artist per se in that sense, but I allowed myself to kind of explore another area, which is still based on visual research and how to work with images, which is found in the digital space. And with that, I kind of created this this installation, which then had products that were linked to it. So from homeware, so these were turned into cushions, t-shirts. It was the idea of a souvenir that you would buy from a museum. So you would go to an exhibition and then you would buy, when you go to an exhibition and there's the t-shirt from that exhibition, it was a fashion collection presented as that. So it was sort of the experience for fashion buyers and the fashion audience to come in, have the experience of being in an art gallery, but then the whole point is actually selling the clothes. It's not really selling the artwork. So that was so this was a Gucci. This was a Gucci project. I started working with, actually, this was my second or third. Let me start with the first one. The first one was the Gucci meme campaign. So through Instagram, I was making my own memes because I enjoy making memes. And as a fashion person, I saw that memes for me were a means to kind of communicate with people. And this was in 2014. So people at that stage had a separation between meme and fashion. For them, you know, the world of meme was the digital space. It was a young audience. It was almost seen as like not a good thing to be associated with luxury fashion, where to me, again, is how you view things. A meme is simply a collection of words and an image. So Alessandro Michele, the head designer at Gucci, they reached out and they said, well, would you create, because you're already making these Gucci memes, would you create a project for Gucci, which would advertise the watches? And we created the first meme. It was a meme campaign, which obviously for some people it was seen as you know, what you do in being original is not always about being liked. It's mostly about, you know, having a point of view. So it had a lot of, for example, these are some of the examples that we had. Is my screen, can everybody see the screen properly without me getting in the way? So the idea was to reach out to different artists and for artists to photograph and create their own meme from the images that they would make, and always featuring the watch. And the campaign was then, you know, for Instagram, because Gucci has millions of followers. And at that point, it had become a feasible space for people to communicate luxury brands, which now seems very obvious because you've got Balenciaga, you've got everybody doing live shows. You know, you can kind of consume fashion through Instagram, the campaigns and everything, and still get a sense of what's going on for a brand without, you know, having to buy a Vogue magazine or without having to go on a brand's website. So Instagram, due to the number of users that they were getting, became at that point in 2015, once people got used to images that were not taken straight from your camera, your phone camera, and reference images like what I was doing, plus memes, it became an automatic sort of platform for fashion brands to put their own photographs and their own content. So Gucci was one of the kind of forward-thinking and I would say most it was the smartest brand when it comes to how to use social media and how to connect with a younger audience, because their whole feed is structured in a way that it's basically like a magazine. If you look at it, it goes from, because I work with a team on the communication, it works in this way that it's, you know, it's products, also campaigns, and then you have celebrities, then you have special campaigns with the advertising, then you have the editorials, the special editorials that they've done. So it's quite dynamic. So you go from celebrities to magazine covers to, it becomes kind of a cultural entity in itself, which is now what brands are realizing. You can't just have an Instagram with just shoes, because, you know, there's no point. Nobody will engage with that. So the teams doing at that stage, the teams doing the kind of concepts like the Gucci meme campaign were people that were working at Vogue Italia previously. So they understood how to create a kind of an Instagram feed, which is at the same time enjoyable in terms of content as almost as a magazine. That's the best way I can compare it. A magazine person would understand that you need this level of kind of changing content and interesting and to keep people's interest. So you'll have the shows, you'll have the streaming of the shows, you'll have a few images from the backstage, you'll have the guests arriving. So there's a certain kind of structure that Gucci has put in place, which a lot of people are now following, which wasn't obvious at the beginning because people just didn't know what to do with it. Brands are still at the moment exploring TikTok because TikTok doesn't seem to be translating itself in a way that is conducive to communicating fashion. TikTok at the moment, and that's why I'm saying, like, if anybody, any young people tuning in, make it an exercise. Try and figure out a way of communicating creatively with TikTok, with videos. They are to some extent because they will use videos which are being used for Instagram, which then those assets are being used for TikTok. But a lot of brands haven't kind of found the same way that Instagram has been working for fashion, where Twitter works for example, for journalists and for putting links to newspaper articles. And that's why it's enduring and it's still ongoing. Instagram is kind of the equivalent of Twitter when it comes to visuals and you know, fashion brands, luxury or not. Same for magazines. I'll use, for example, Dazed, which is a British independent magazine with 1.2 million followers. Well, there's Gucci again. They have their website, but it's all connected to, you know, you go onto the connection and then you go onto the website in order to go onto the website. So it's kind of an entry point because that's what people have on their phone. You know, they're scrolling through. If something interests them, if there's you know, the article will be published here with a bit of an introduction to the article. The person is interested in, they'll go into the link and they will, you know, find the article. So it drives the foot flow to the magazine, the website, and it's the same with Gucci. It drives the kind of the foot flow. If you're talking, if you were imagining that it's retail, it drives the foot flow onto the online shop. So Instagram at this stage becomes more of a platform. It becomes less about referencing and it becomes about creating content for Instagram. So this is where, you know, teams get bigger and they've gotten the departments at luxury houses are a little bit bigger now, where before it was 3 people and they had to do, you know, they had budgets and they had to do almost the same work as you know, the campaign, because in the previous, what you would call legacy media, which is magazines, all brands had to worry about was to create your seasons campaign. Where's Gucci? You had to create your seasons campaign. And that's all you had to do. Where's the seasons campaign? Like, let's say you would have a campaign like this with Ryan Gosling. You would send your pages into Vogue and Vogue would publish them, and that's it. So now with social media and the millions of people on there, you literally have to create these mini kind of contents and campaigns that, you know, have to keep it's not really so much about beating the algorithm, it's about creating the kind of the identity of the brand and the connection with its fan base or its followers or its potential customer. So the product is not always forgotten, but at the same time, you also have to create kind of something that is culturally relevant, and that's from a brand perspective. And in this case, I can show a magazine format for Fantastic Man. Sorry. So when you already have a magazine like Fantastic Man, which is a print magazine, so it's a legacy media. So legacy media, it's newspapers, magazine, TV. or old media. It's a bit rude to call it old media. It's legacy print TV. When it's already a print magazine and you've got to live online, like I showed before, Dazed, for example, will have a website where content is being created. So the social media connects with the social media connects with the website. And then the print magazine is something else altogether, but not even altogether, because some of the things that are featured on the website can sometimes be featured in the magazine itself. But for example, with us, with Fantastic Men, where it's a magazine that is designed for people to enjoy, as such, in terms of the object itself, I'm trying to find a way to show the size of it. So for example, it's not designed as your Vogue A4. We design it a little bit more more of a square, so the images come out even bigger, even more enjoyable. The work goes into the font. We've got someone who's amazing and founded it. It's Job van Bannekom. He's designed prize-winning magazines, and this one is again one of his creations, and it's a prize-winning magazine. So it's about people who appreciate magazine as an object, because magazines aren't dead. So Instagram comes along, but magazines aren't dead. They still exist. Print is still relevant, but the purpose of print is now, I would say, if you want to be smart about it, you have to rethink the role of your magazine and what is the purpose that your magazine would have. You don't just start a magazine for the sake of starting a magazine, like let's say if it was the 1980s, where you sort of think, oh, I have an audience and I'm going to make a magazine. Because I think with millennials, Gen Z, social media, the internet, less people buy magazine, or people buy magazines for a different reason. So designing a magazine can also be part of the pleasure that you give people in reading it. And this one is more about the design of the magazine, and for someone to really, spend the next 6 months, because it comes out twice a year, just enjoying each issue. And for us as well, the way that the issues are designed and structured, it's not anymore about the news, because the news, you get the news online. The news breaks, it's quite immediate. If something happens at a fashion house, or it's the internet is there to give you immediacy. It gives you straight away the information. So once the magazine is out, it's going to be old news, let's put it this way. So it's unlike a newspaper, or it's a different pace. So you try and work around themes, for example, is the one thing that we've done at the moment. So we've had, for example, the new issue is the menswear issue. We've looked at different designers which we think are kind of significant now or in the past. So from Jean-Paul Gaultier to Willy Chevaria, a Mexican designer based in New York, also works at Calvin Klein. We have Jun Takahashi of Undercover. So we kind of picked these kind of key designers. This is Kiko Kostadinov, based in London, that we think kind of define a moment in time, and that's what we work with in putting the issue together. And then smaller, obviously, stories that are inside for the person to have this kind of 6 months journey to go through the magazine. So it takes 6 months to make, but it also, we try and make it not a instantly consumable, a quick read that you throw away, which a lot of magazines are kind of now creating as a kind of a counter proposal to the digital space. So that was the magazine. We go back to, so that was Fantastic Men. this was my final project at Central St. Martin's, and this is where it comes in with, for me, the process that I work with students and I try and teach, to try and create work which maybe is a lot more personal, because there's so many images that live online that it's a bit pointless to try and make something which is just cool, or something which is just trendy, or something which is just almost the same as what everybody else is doing, because if it already exists, you know, what's the point of really doing, you know, that work, unless it personally resonates with what you have to say as an artist or as a creative. So I often tell my students to try and think as artist. It's not anymore, don't think like a creative anymore, because the creative is you know, creative, it's, you put a lot less of yourself in the work, and it's more, you know, a commercial job where you would say, okay, well, this is the bag, we need to sell the bag, this is the demographic, and this is what's cool in that demo, and you do that. So it doesn't really take that much of a self kind of putting yourself in the work. These days with Instagram, because of what they say in English, the ubiquity of images. So there's so many images that for you to be distinctive, it can only come from a personal place. So personal points of interest, personal, maybe something you're obsessed with, and you try and kind of develop a body of work around it. Maybe it's generally it's better to start with an idea than a style, because the style of images, it will come automatically if you're good in your process, but the idea is what's going to kind of help you. So when I work with students, I tell them to do a mind map, even if they get given a theme. A mind map would be to write your keywords that you're going to be working with. Like in this case, I mean, this is not my mind map, this is someone else's. They start with body. So are you interested in, you know, the female form of the body? And then what else comes to mind when the word body is being said? So, you know, it becomes skeleton, it becomes death, it becomes gods, it becomes costume, it becomes, so wherever your mind takes you, allow it to take you there. And then from those keywords, you can start researching areas that could be interesting for you to work with. So it allows you to connect with more of your unconscious sort of side, and in order for you to build a visual research, which then can lead you to your final project, to your final body of work, that it's an editorial, that it's, you know, a campaign, that it's a book. It's finding those points of interest, because it's quite hard when you tell someone, like, so what are you obsessed about? What do you want to make your work about? A lot of people don't know, especially when you're quite young. So you kind of try and expand your mind through these self-reflection exercises. So I find that the mind map can help you find maybe something that you want to talk about. So my project was about Blackness and masculinity. Obviously, the closer it is to your own kind of lived experience, generally the better. That's what I tend to advise. If they used to tell us at St. Martin's, if, you know, if you're like, oh, I'm going to do a project on plastic surgery, the question would be, but have you had plastic surgery? If it's no, well, you know, they'd be like, okay, has your mother had plastic surgery? Why plastic surgery? And you can never say, oh, because it's cool. Cool is the enemy of great work. So you must never try to be cool as such. That's how you end up having great work, which is cool and relevant, is by avoiding to fall into the trap of what's out there and what's cool. So because it's something that happens now with the amount of projects and works that are being shared online, is a lot of people are it's almost like this need to emulate what everybody else is doing, and this goes from a very young students to big designers, where I sit across them and they're sort of like, oh, I want to be like Demna, and it's like, but you're not Demna, so I'm not going to work with you to be Demna. There's only one Demna, and Demna does Balenciaga, and he does it well because it is about him. It is about his vision of the world. It is about how he connects with the world. And that's how he ends up doing interesting work, which is more real than trying to be like him. There are certain things that obviously make business sense and make logical sense when you work, and what people respond to, or, you know, when to post, which photographer to work with, etc. But that still doesn't give you the what. What are you about is definitely what's going to help you create a like-minded community in order to have an actual true fan base in your work. And the way that you reach that is obviously through your own exposure to past kind of art. As Mucha Prada says, study art, study architecture, study history, and then study yourself. What is your relationship with all those things? So it can't just be a self-indulgent. Often I tell students, like, it can't just be like, oh, but I like cute things and I like pink because that's just who I am. Go out there, look at everybody who's worked with cute things, with pink. What is the meaning of cute? What is the meaning of cute in Japan? What is the, research all of them, because there's a whole history of people who have worked with that theme. It's the same when I was working with Blackness and masculinity. I had to find what angle, what is it that I wanted to say to Black creative? What is it that I wanted to say to a Black readership if I wanted to propose a new way of for them to view themselves? So you can't depend too much on what already exists, because you need to create who you are in personal work, but you also can't ignore what's around you, because you don't work from a vacuum. I think the only person who works from a vacuum, and she has a kind of an interesting process, is Rei Kawakubo with Comme des Garçons, but her whole approach is also let me find, sorry. Okay, let's open this, the Met Gala. Oh, I'll open the wiki page. Her whole process is one of always wanting to do something new and something that's never been seen, seen before. It's always a challenge, and she always says that it's the hardest thing to do. But the way she manages this is she starts from an abstract place. Then the people making the patterns are not in conversation with the people making the prints or the textiles. And she floats between the two, and then each one have to reflect on whatever key sentence she gave them, whatever inspiration. It could be a piece of paper that's crumbled. It could be whatever she gives them as kind of something to work from or to work with as a team. The team works around that, and then the textile team works around that, and then it all comes together and it gets put together, which then can create another layer of newness. So it's not everything is developed together. And the hair by Julian Dees is also, he only gets given the brief a few days before the show. He doesn't always see the collection before he creates the hair. He also gets given, so things work on a more intuitive, I would say. And obviously she has a certain time. There's there is different eras of Comme des Garçons. So she has evolved. She's more in her sculptural phase at the moment. So obviously the pattern makers and the hair people will evolve with that. But the whole idea is to do kind of a inward exercise. But the inward exercise is not in an empty space. It's also all the things that you have absorbed as a creative or an artist. Let's go back. So the process of building a major project, my project was then built. It was around Blackness, queerness, is context as well. So when you make something, you're not just making it for yourself. There is the idea of context and where does your work fit in. So now you are making work for Black men, queer men, and a reconsideration of the Black image. And you adding to your body of work, because there has been other artists that have worked with Black bodies or with Mexican culture or with American culture, whatever you choose, or Italian culture, or whatever theme you have used, you are adding to that kind of structure. You would say it's like a house that you're building, you adding another brick to that kind of work. Obviously, the best kind of work is one where the general public feels that they're reflected in. So people would have to feel that, I think it's, I can't remember which American artist said, you know, the magic is when the work is personal, turns universal, so it's a general subject that can resonate with people, but at the same time, it's aligned with the time, with the times that you live in. Because you can have a personal obsession and build a body of work, and then maybe in 10 years, people will realize, oh, wow, he was quite genius, or, you know, the work was brilliant. But it only makes sense, you know, in retrospective, or 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, because you may be too far ahead, or maybe it's too personal, and the times haven't aligned with the kind of work that you do. So to find sometimes themes that can work in a more that can resonate with the general public is to be able to engage with the general culture. So, you know, the conversations about inclusivity, about gender, about race, about the rise of fascism, it's all of that you're going to find in the news, and you can have the kind of work which respond to that, which then makes your work a little bit more relevant in terms of context. So that's where, again, like I was mentioning before, the importance of context, that your work can look that it is of its time, not that it needs to be, but it always helps, and especially with fashion. That's what I find. Once you've obviously built a certain visual language, is to find the people that you want to collaborate with. In this case, for me, I collaborated with Kembo Addy. He was the same year as me. Where's Campbell? So it's the importance of collaboration. So because fashion is, or even creative projects, you never do them on your own. You know, it's a team. Now, as an art director, I would say like 50% of my work is to put the right team together, is to be able to find the right collaborators for you to then end up creating something that's obviously strong, because I'm not a photographer. I've done styling, but it's not my strength. So it's finding your strength, and then finding other people that have a strength which can help elevate your work. So the collaboration is, again, this, it can either be born from the community that you evolve in. So your community of artists, that's why you need to communicate, you know, to connect with your fellow students. If you're a student, if you're not a student, you need to be part of a creative scene, or it can even be like club nights. It can be like-minded people that might have the same interest, or it can be someone whose work you think will best translate the ideas that that you have. So it's the importance of not being in your own bubble and of being able to collaborate with people. So for my final project, I collaborated with Campbell Addy, who is also a fellow St. Martin student. He was doing a BA in photography, and I was doing an MA in image making. And the good thing with collaborating with someone who starting their career at the same time as you is that your work is joined together. And if I get offered a space in a book about that photograph, then, you know, he's obviously credited. And if he gets, because he's taken those images to exhibitions, he's taken them, it's been in a book, it's been on a cover of, it's been on a cover of the Creative Review. They wanted to interview him. So my project ended up on a cover of a creative magazine in London. So, and just as a student, because you have the right attitude towards and the right choices towards collaboration. So collaboration is another kind of key thing, besides knowing who you are, what you want to say, is who do you want to work with, and who do you best aligned with, because there's to some extent there's strength in numbers, and there's also a relationship that can create a moment in time with when it comes to the creative industry. So each magazine every decade can define a certain moment in time, and they have recurring, I would say, like stylists that they always work with and photographers that they always work with. So if you are part of that group of people, you can kind of create a moment in time and define a moment in time. The 90s were defined by a group of photographers. The 2000s were defined by a group of stylists and photographers. So, you know, it's also being part of a kind of a creative group. What would I call it? It's being part of it's being part of a creative conversations, which isn't just about you, because, you know, fine art, you can get away with just being about you, because it's your own exhibition, it's your solo exhibitions. But even a fine artist doesn't start with a solo exhibitions, they start with a group exhibition, and because the work is aligned with whatever the curator wants to say. So it's good to collaborate with and to reach out to people to try and get people to work with you. Even if you think, well, this person is too important, you never know, because I know a lot of people that got their big break by just reaching out to someone, and because someone appreciates your work and all of a sudden gives you a chance to collaborate with. So that's the importance of collaboration. This was the format of the magazine, because we had to create a magazine. For me, I thought that the concept of a magazine wasn't really interesting for me, a print magazine. Because of my obsession with photography, I wanted to create more of a smaller format magazine. It was a big box, quite luxurious box, which had the smaller version of the magazine, which had all the different prints. But then it came in a box which had all the images that were inside the magazine as a print. So the idea was, because of the throwaway idea that people have with magazines, I just didn't want to work in that way. I wanted to bring in this idea of, what if a magazine would also be, because the vehicle at the end of the day for a magazine these days is not news anymore, it's photography. So what if we made that photography available for people as a print to own? So the image lives a little bit longer, and the kind of images that you would obviously make would be different, because they would have to have an emphasis on colors, on skin tones, it wouldn't be so much about the fashion. It would be more of a something that someone can hang on their wall in their house. I also did printed garments because I came from the background of garments, and also thinking of a magazine as a printed garment. But like I said, St. Martin's is an art school, so you can do pretty kind of experimental ideas of what a magazine could be. This is another project with Gucci, collaborating with brands as a freelance. It's more about, I would say, building a relationship from your point of view. So if they come to you, is because there's a specific point of view that they would like you to bring to the project, because the brand has existed before you, it will exist after you. It's these brands are like 100 years old. Gucci turned 100 last year. So when you develop your language, again, try and have something that makes you specifically you, because it then helps people to know what they want to be part of. A lot of agencies these days tend to go for contemporary photographers as fine art photographers to then do fashion, than just a fashion photographer who just wants to photograph clothing. Because there's so many technically accomplished people online these days that it's a bit pointless. You can, if you want a nice picture, you just get someone who's technically accomplished, but that person is just technically accomplished. So a lot of people stop at being good technically, but the work says nothing. The emphasis should be about, even if you're not good technically, because you can find people you can collaborate with, you put more emphasis on what you want to say, what are your areas of interest, and kind of what drives your work. And that can change throughout time, but you try and put a little bit of something that's quite personal in the work. Again, with collaboration, this was a collaboration for a Gucci art wall and a project based on skateboards. Sorry, for their watch again, where I collaborated with, he's an artist from the 90s. It was called Zoltar the Magnificent, and it was really interesting, like group of designers and artists that created clothing, but at the same time they created events and kind of a sort of streetwear cultural interesting moment in the 90s, 2000s. So these are people that I've always wanted to work with. So when you get a chance and you get a budget, you get a luxury brand to pay for your project, reach out to artists you've always wanted to collaborate with. If you think it's someone that can benefit the project, but also is someone that you've always wanted to do something with, because having the power of a fashion brand behind you then helps open doors with other people, and that's your chance as well to build your portfolio with the kind of work that you wanted to create. So this one was based on skateboard. Again, if you get given a theme, you don't have to be literal with a theme. So for me, I was given London and skateboarding, and I wanted to look at skateboarding from a gender non-conforming aspect, and also to look at the generational aspect of skateboarding, where a lot of people think that skateboarding is for young 14-year-old. It generally is, because if you fall off, you probably will get better. You probably won't hurt your hip as much. So it's obviously past your 30s. People stop skating. But I went on well, actually, let me explain first where the idea came from. The idea came from the fact that it's Pat McG skateboard. Sorry, skate. Oh, it's Patty McG. So again, it's a visual research. When you do your visual research and you go back in time and you don't just stop at an Instagram and saying, oh, skaters on Instagram, what are they doing? You can find things that are really interesting visually. So I came across Patty McG, who was a famous skater in the 1960s. And, you know, she had a beehive. She literally did not look what you would imagine to be a skater. So for me, it was kind of imagining, but how old is she? And the idea of how we are being sold this idea of skate as generally young men, just out of their teenage years or teenage young men. And I wanted to kind of play and kind of bring something new to the program by mixing, the project by mixing the age groups and kind of rethinking the idea of skate and who gets to be on a skateboard. I did find people on Facebook with it's called I think over 40 skaters. I wanted to do street casting and actually use the over 40 skaters. That didn't happen because of timelines and everything else. But you work with a casting agent. That's another advice. At that point, I wasn't working with a casting agent, and I ended up being more actresses and people don't actually skate. The rest, these kids all skate, and they're all part of the London skate scene. But she doesn't skate, unfortunately. But the idea, she stood in for an actual older lady who skates.
William.
Yes, I was
William,
going to say, should we do question?
Sorry, I'm afraid about the time, but could it be good if we can see a little video in order that people write down their questions for you, and then after that we made it and you answer. Entonces,
thank you.
A todos vamos. Thank you very much. Sorry for interrupt. Entonces,
no, that's okay.
Y todas las personas, si quieren hacerle una pregunta a William, por supuesto, apúntenla en el chat. Y mientras tanto, vamos a ver un testimonio de uno de nuestros alumnos de Polimoda. Entonces, en un momento, corre video. En este momento.
En Polimoda, y considero que esta experiencia verdaderamente me cambió la vida. Primero que nada me permitió conocer gente de todo el mundo, así que mi red de amistades y de networking realmente creció muchísimo. También por estudiar aquí se me abrieron las puertas a grandes oportunidades, como ser publicada por Vogue Italia y Le Officiel. Vivir en Florencia simplemente fue maravilloso, y ya estando ahí es muy fácil moverte y continuar explorando la gastronomía y los paisajes de Italia, que todos sabemos que es maravilloso. Y algo que es una de las cosas que yo más agradezco fue poder conocer verdaderamente a mis maestros, quienes son personas que ocupan posiciones importantes en grandes casas de moda. Ellos siempre tuvieron muy buena disposición a escucharte, conocerte y ayudarte. Entonces, si están pensando en estudiar acá, yo se los recomiendo 100%, vale la pena, abre puertas, pasas a formar parte de esta red de networking que es muy sólida y muy importante, y bueno, viene acompañado de un gran estatus que también es reconocido en todo el mundo. Entonces, anímense.
We have a question there. It says, Marisa Mota to everyone. She says, thank you for the talk, William. What do you think about the new preference for Reels on Instagram instead of the usual photography app it used to be? Do you think it's damaging for photographers?
Well, it is and it isn't, because I think, in my opinion, and the advice that I generally give to young photographers is that you should see Instagram as a kind of an entry to your website, if you have a website. So what matters is that some of your best work, if you want to do it that way, is there. It's not the engagement. It doesn't matter, because when an art director or a photographer, someone is looking for a photography assistant, etc., they're going to look at your page. It doesn't matter that it has 20 likes or doesn't. If it looks great, it looks great. It's not so much about engagement. Instagram is trying to play with the algorithm and the engagement and forcing people into reels. If reels is not the way you work, don't do that. Still have your work on Instagram. Don't worry so much about the reels and the just see it as, if I have to Google you, that's where I'm going to find you, because that's what often happens in the industry these days, is that people will say, oh, there's this young American photographer, and the first response is like, okay, can you send me the Instagram? Because that's how people are kind of exchanging the talents and kind of placing people for projects. Is if you don't exist on Instagram, it's a lot harder for people to find you. Then that means they have to go and look for you on a website. So only view your Instagram as a repository, as they say, of your work. Do not worry about engagement. Don't try and make work to beat the algorithm, because I know artists that are like, oh, I need to paint more because, because of the algorithm on Instagram. I can't think of a worse reason to make your art or your work is to be visible on Instagram. I know it's not great not to be visible, but worry more about your work than about your visibility.
William, there is some questions that I think it could be pretty much the same question. So one is, how do you make an equilibrium? What happens with personal interests are biased by mass media? How can you avoid that? I meant, is almost the same question about how much design, how much artistry. No, thank you for the talk, William. What do you think about the new? No, that I already made. Which are the best advice that you can give? I love your talk. I agree with being more of an artist than a designer, to experiment your own concepts and for your voice. My question will be how you recommend to empathize with people, to know their necessities and being able to stand your own style with that. So it's pretty much the same question. How can you make that equilibrium between business and fashion?
Yeah. I mean, I did put it in my one of my notes here. So I had some key points that I might have used. It's to distinguish between art and commerce, between popularity and quality work, and between visibility and respect. So those are the kind of like key things that you have to keep in mind. It's okay to do commercial work, and it is necessary because you got to make a living, but at the same time, you got to know where and when it's necessary, and when do you flex your artistic muscles, and when the concept requires more of a commercial approach, and to be more commercial. It's not a dirty word. You can have both, but on your portfolio and your website, you don't need to put everything. That's another thing. It's like, don't put commercial work that you're not proud of on your website or your Instagram. Nobody needs to know that you've done that project. You get paid for it. They're not paying for you to advertise the work there.
And at last, Brenna says, hi, could you please give us your advice on how to choose a team to start working with? That's a big question. And what other social media besides Instagram and TikTok to share your work? So that would be the final consideration.
I would say, for how to put a team together, I always tell students, do not go and pick someone who works in black and white and minimalist fashion to do a colorful shoot. A David LaChapelle, if you want Richard Avendon. Like, don't force someone so out of their comfort zone. So find someone whose work is an extension of the project you're trying to do. So if it's already kind of there in the way that they light things, in the way that they capture people, in the kind of casting that they work with, and your project is aligned with that, then that's like-minded person, and they're going to then, you know, you challenge them with maybe the concept, but don't challenge them in the way that they work as such. Don't force someone who's black and white to go and shoot color if they're not comfortable with color. Then the other platforms is to go and look at Picture, to look at this Picture. There is, I mean, Photo Vogue Festival, where I'm part of the jury. They sort of put work there, is to follow Alessia Glaviano of Vogue Italia. She's a great supporter of image makers, and to build your own website as well with your work.
That will be one of the questions. I think the same as in every time, we have those kind of challenges. I was particularly moved by something that you said. Each decade is marked by a certain magazine, and that could be Visionary ID magazine or another in these times. But the same is happening here in Mexico. We also have our 10-year time of our own classical magazines here in our own ecosystem. So I think this interest of everybody hearing you about how to develop themselves, how to develop a certain language, how to be original, are the questions that are always gravitating into the fashion creation. Thank you very much for sharing with us. I'm quite honored to meet you. I think everybody, todo el mundo debe de seguirlo en Instagram. Thank you very much to Polymoda for having the opportunity to share with you all these ideas and all these images and all of these point of views. So thank you very much, William Colt. It was a pleasure. Y para todos ustedes, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Por supuesto, el encuentro creativo es una iniciativa de la Embajada de Italia a través de la Cámara de Comercio Italiana, pero no podría ser posible sin nuestros patrocinadores. Entonces, ahorita les voy a leer la lista de ellos. And William, thank you very much once again.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
And have a good day. So,
bye.
Bye. Nuestros patrocinadores, ahorita sale la lista. Entonces, entre ellos están pues todas estas empresas italianas que tienen a bien colaborar con nosotros para llevar este encuentro hacia todos ustedes. Entonces, precisamente con esta lista, ahí están, son Natuzzi, Essilor Luxottica, Artemide, Bulgaria, Moretti Brothers, Alfa Parf, Ferrari, Davide Groppi, United Colors of Benetton, Yamamay, Seña, Fernet Branca, SMEG, Cartel, Ferrero y Orfe México, que junto con las universidades mexicanas, las universidades italianas y la Embajada de Italia, les agradecemos infinitamente su presencia y nos veremos aquí en la siguiente sesión, que será ciertamente a las 11 a.m., donde vamos a estar hablando, híjole, de la ropa y el cine, o sea, todo lo que es el diseño de vestuario. Entonces viene María Grazia Colombini. Entonces los esperamos ahí, nos veremos en algunos minutos. Arrivederci. De nada, Tania, bye.